The chest expander is a special training device that's been around for over 100 years, heavily used among all the old school greats like Eugene Sandow, Fred Roland, John Grimmick, Reg Park, Thomas Inch, and many more. Also known as strand pulling, the chest expander was known for its versatility, allowing for movement patterns often seen in modern machines. In particular, it best develops the entire traps, rear delts, biceps, and triceps, providing a yoked yet limb-dominant kind of physique, which is interesting considering the device's name. See, the chest was originally referred to total upper body circumferential girth. So although the expander was primarily designed for extending and pulling motions, the increased back gains resulted in inches gained in torso thickness, also contributing to what was described as a sinewy physique, detailing dense back separation with rope-like definition. That said, it's still possible to build the pecs with expanders, but they need to be anchored in reverse in order to replicate a cable station for doing flies and presses. But for that, the antagonist device of the time was the York chest crusher, which was often supersetted with expander work. Regardless, the chest expander is the true OG, being most popular and having the greatest success among history's top lifetime naturals. From the Bronze to Silver era, expander training was not a secret. In fact, your grandfather may have owned one. So then, if expanders were so effective, why did their popularity eventually decline? Simple. It was the rise of resistance bands and machines. The bands were cheaper, less complicated, and more appealing to the normie population. And with Nautilus having their own variable resistance machines that somewhat resembled spring tension, it was only a matter of time before the mainstream would move away from expanders. There were new cable machines, new hammer strength designs, and so much more, eventually getting to the point we're at now. The exercise options became so diversified, thereby reducing the need for expanders, which makes perfect logical sense. The expander was a rugged, primitive-looking piece which turned off many, and now it was possible to attack similar movement patterns without using it. Alternatively, we can also go full conspiracy mode and suggest that it was too effective, hence the need to market new equipment. Regardless, the golden era of bodybuilding is when they went out of style. Before that, everybody knew about expanders. That said, I want to point out that just because there was new equipment, it never meant the classical way was ineffective. In fact, the classical way produced some of the best physiques of all time, among those we know were 100% natural. So I must stress, the expander is not a gimmick or toy. It features high strength standards, endless progression for multiple exercises, and will help you get bigger. And as someone who's been using it for a good 6 months now, I will confidently state that most lifters, particularly in a home gym or calisthenics context, should own one. The expander changed the game for me, and I wish I started using one earlier, as the versatility is unmatched. The exercises will challenge you in a way that you've never felt before, because even though the expander is similar to bands, the precise specs offer superior strength curves. See, the springs are three-dimensional and expand in real time, providing a 100% linear strength curve. They also hold a bit more elastic energy, resulting in even crazier negatives with force control. And because it's many smaller springs, the sensation of load doesn't change in a drastic way like with using thicker or double bands. Essentially, the only way to resemble an expander is if you own many pairs of weaker bands, cut to a short length, then clip with carabiners and D-handles. And even then, it wouldn't be ideal. Understand that the expander's dimensions were perfected a long time ago and never had to be modified throughout the decades. That tells the entire story. So a DIY setup won't even compare. The expander hits different, and anyone who's used one will know exactly what I mean. Like, I still find it difficult to put into words, but they're much smoother and yield predictable progressive overload. Usually, if you can do 12 to 15 reps on any exercise, you can add a spring and will often be down to around 5 reps or so without changing the resistance profile. So it always feels the same, just you got more spring tension. With bands, the next tension up might be too hard or feel weird throughout different parts of the range of motion, i.e. going from mini bands to monster mini bands. So most lifters resort to high rep, non-failure pumping for injury prevention, or as accommodating resistance by attaching bands to barbells, but never as a straight muscle building tool. Whereas the expander keeps you in a reasonable hypertrophy rep window and allows you to get stronger in a way that's very similar to traditional weight training. So it's a very familiar, rewarding experience, and you'll always feel like you're working towards something. Most commonly, trying to hit 5 springs on big exercise, which I'll demonstrate later. Now, most intermediate lifters will start off around 3 springs, but with time it's totally possible to max out your expander for reps. In fact, this was normal for the old school greats. And right now, I want to briefly talk about them to get you connecting the dots. First, let's cover Fred Roland, who was the greatest expander athlete and is my inspiration for getting into strand pulling. I'm going to start by showing you the photograph that changed everything for me. After seeing this, I immediately bought an expander on that same day. Observe. Can you guess which year this photograph was taken in? 1950? 1940? Nope. 1905. Yeah, you heard that right. 1905, looking like this. Can you imagine living at the start of the 20th century, walking down the street and seeing this man? Almost 120 years ago, this must have been so alien, being this jacked while having almost nothing. No gyms, no optimal diets, no scientific training knowledge, etc. Yet, you have someone who would have easily been labeled as a fake natty today, even though steroids didn't even exist. And to top it off, what's most astonishing about Fred is how he built this incredible physique without using barbells or dumbbells. His bold claim is to have only trained with chest expanders. Now, some may be doubtful, but consider his custom expander was equivalent to 140 kilograms in tensile strength, aka being able to withstand horses, and now it starts to make sense. He also had no reason to lie back then because he literally gained nothing. No fame, no money, just pride. So, what's the takeaway here? Resistance is resistance, and strength is strength, like I'm always telling you guys. In this case, when Roland was challenged by other old-timers to demonstrate his lifting ability, he was instantly capable of doing a 120 kilo overhead press, which is 265 pounds, with a 165 kilo, which is 365 pound floor press for low repetitions. Keep in mind, the bench press wasn't even invented back then, so these were the 2 lifts to judge off for the upper body. Legs, we don't know much about him, but he also spotted 43 centimeters, 17-inch shredded arms, and gained the nickname Human Anatomy Chart, which if you look at this next shot, is justified. See what I meant earlier by sinewy physique? This is what the chest expander can do, where all the muscles of the upper back are fully developed. And again, I want to point out just how insane his final expander was. The average 5-spring chest expander sold today is only equivalent to 30 kilograms of tensile strength, with each spring being 6 kilograms, which is 4.5 times less than Roland's. So the only expander that comes close today is Robert Baraban's new all-steel 7-spring chest expander being equivalent to 70 kilograms of tensile strength, with each spring being 10 kilograms, which is still half of Roland's. Really putting into perspective just how freakishly strong he was. That said, considering Roland did single and 2-arm exercises, there's no way he did unilateral exercises with 140 kilograms. He must have attached a longer handle to do bilateral exercises with, otherwise some feats would have been impossible. Also, keep in mind the total number refers to the top number, like with accommodating resistance. So it's not 140 kilos at the bottom. It's only when the springs are fully lengthened, which with your wingspan might not even be possible. Therefore, pulling 7 springs with one arm is definitely doable, but not double that unless using both arms. And especially for compounds, this becomes 100% realistic because going back to Fred, he's hitting numbers that modern natties have achieved with comparable weight training exercises while looking similar. So, in other words, if you want to train like Fred Roland and mimic your standards according to him, then getting Robert Baraban's 7-spring chest expander, available at shop.handgripper.net, is the one-to-one definitive way. It's all metal construction, has knurled rotating handles, is heavy, thus maximally stable, will last a lifetime, and is unquestionably the #1 expander to have ever been made available to the general public. Which, by the way, extends to all of Robert's Bronze Era inspired equipment, as they're highly specialized for this purpose, and as my man Golden Era Bookworm likes to say, made for Hercules himself. So again, you can either use 2 expanders to save a bit of time and have the same total load as Fred Rollon on some exercises, or do 1 arm at a time. Regardless, the ultimate long-term goal is maxing out at 7 springs, which I've done on 1 exercise so far. When I started, I couldn't even budge 5. Anyway, Fred is the GOAT, but the second runner-up for expander strength would be the one and only Reg Park, who arguably had the best physique of the 1940s and 50s and might be the most impressive natural we've seen yet. And yes, he was natural, as he maintained peak muscularity even into his later years. That's what decades of proper training plus dedication looks like, and should seek to inspire all of us.
I'm delighted that here in America that the powers that be have in fact put steroids on the same level as cocaine and heroin, and I think this is great. The sooner they do away with it and get rid of it, the better.
It was the same with John Grimmick, who looked his best in his late 40s and of course enhanced his workouts with chest expanders to fill in the gaps. He's also responsible for getting Reg Park into it. See how wisdom gets passed down? So it's no surprise that Reg spent time using the expander, offering courses, and just like Fred Rollon, owned a custom one that none of us can get. His featured 10 springs, which would have been equivalent to around 100 kilograms of tensile strength, which he maxed out on various pull-aparts alongside one-arm presses. This is scary strength, and when you look at Reg's back and arms, it all adds up. He had 19-inch arms, 16-inch forearms, and a 52-inch chest with a 32-inch waist. So with that in mind, I want to quote what Reg had to say about cables, which is not referring to actual cables, but springs with the chest expander, which you can clearly see in the photos. I have given the question of training with cables a great deal of thought, and in all sincerity, I confess that my genuine opinion is that cables can be utilized in such a way as to make them as efficient as weights. Cable sets can in fact be used along similar lines as weights, and the same movements can also be performed. Now, Reg would also bring his expander while traveling and claimed to have not only maintained all size by exclusively using it, but also took on a fuller appearance, and he was pleased with the gratifying results. Straight from his mouth. So, if Reg, who considered barbells and dumbbells to be king, eventually put his word, which meant a lot back then and he was a true gentleman, on expander effectiveness and managed to acquire more gains through using it, what does that indicate? It's serious, and it seems like many old-timers share this conclusion. So I can go on and on about historical figures, including Eugene Sandow, who's labeled as the grandfather of bodybuilding. He also trained with expanders and shared his expander workouts as a second system of bodybuilding. Talk about a bold title. Earl Lederman, he was also yoked as hell and had extensive expander experience. Thomas Inch, he advised the same thing for developing secret strength and created the Expander Challenge, which led to competitions up until the mid-1940s in Britain. The examples are endless. So to wrap this part up, if you see a jacked strongman or bodybuilder with a mustache from the Bronze and a little bit into the Silver era, there's a very high chance that he benefited from a chest expander. So then, speaking of expander effectiveness, how exactly do we program it? Generally speaking, you'll want to train in the 5 to 10 rep range and only move up a spring once you can hit 12 reps for all sets, or at least 15 for one set. High reps past that point aren't necessary unless it's for warm-ups or injury prevention. But you'll find it's even tough to do that since you strain so much on every rep. Now regarding volume, I must emphasize this is dependent on what was done earlier in the workout. In general, you will never need more than 2 expander exercises per muscle, and in most cases, 1 will suffice if you're also combining weights. So no more than 4 to 6 total sets per workout. The expander is not a device you'll want to do high volume on. For example, if you did cable pushdowns, then you don't need to do violent extensions and sideways extensions. This can be redundant. Pick your favorite, then move on. Most of what you do are accessories anyway. Plus, you can always rotate throughout the months or train other variations on a different day, particularly if there is frequency in your program. Likewise, if you did rows, pull-ups, and lat pull-downs, then just one pull apart will get the job done. You don't need vertical overhand, vertical underhand, horizontal, then expander pull-downs. The only exception is if you're doing drop sets, which allows for even less sets to be done. And this has two applications. The first is if you're doing a free weighted exercise with a poor strength curve, i.e. dumbbell lateral raise. After failure, you can then do expander laterals to correct any joint angle deficiencies that got left out. Alternatively, if you don't even have dumbbells or simply chose to just do the spring version, then you can go to failure with low reps, around 5, then drop the spring and go to failure again, repeating until you're out of springs or form breaks down. Now the second application, which is by far my favorite, is mechanical drop sets. This involves not changing the weight, but rather modifying your body positioning or technique so you can continue to push hard. The best exercise to do this with is the pull apart. You start with the hardest version, so horizontal, go to failure, then switch to the vertical, and go to failure again. Then you can optionally do one more with the overhand grip for another 2 reps or so. Therefore, when pairing 3 motions, there's nothing wrong with only doing a single set. So it's efficient, though very intense. Whereas with 2 motions, say going from sideways extensions to back presses, I'd recommend doing 2 sets without doing more exercises. Next, there's expander-only workouts or allocating a large portion of your exercise selection to them. The only people who should consider this are those who maybe just have a power rack and a barbell, calisthenics athletes who don't use rings, or those who go to a packed gym with equipment that's not ideal. In those cases, for proper isolation and ensuring we don't have muscular imbalances, the expander is the all-inclusive solution. Most of the major exercises can be substituted, and like I discussed early on, the modern equivalent simply copied what the expander was already doing. So we're just substituting when applicable. In my case, I train at home 9 out of 10 times, so you best believe the expander is being used in all my upper body workouts. Not only do I enjoy it, but it saves space, it's multi-use, and doesn't cost as much as owning several machines. That's a big deal. Now, if I went to a high-end gym full of prime equipment with perfect biomechanics and adjustable strength curves, things might be a bit different. But hey, I'm good with my expander, and you'll be too. Lastly, as a fun little pro tip, let's say you manage to max out your expander on some exercises and refuse to do high reps. Then you can always throw on garage door springs or industrial springs, which were designed for heavy machinery, construction projects, and cars. It's a bit psychotic, but this was a thing for some elites and gave the option of training legs a bit harder, particularly for leg pressing motions and hip hinges. That said, I honestly wouldn't advise it. It's much smarter to do pre-exhaust, and by the time you acquire a top 1% strength, you've already milked the important mass gains of expander training. You don't need to become the next Fred Roland, okay? Anyway, those are the major points about chest expanders. Now I'm going to finalize by showing you my favorite exercises, which you've already seen many times throughout this lengthy video. Now there's obviously others, but I'm only explaining the benefits for the best. And these are the ones I regularly do. The most important exercise is the vertical pull apart using an underhand grip. This allows for moderate spring tension to be expanded, at least 1 spring more compared to horizontal, which I'll show you in a second. This exercise heavily develops your upper traps with some rear delts, but it's mostly a thickness builder. Make sure to lean back a bit in order for the springs to clear the chin. And always control the eccentrics. Don't let the springs spring back aggressively. Keeping form smooth will allow you to feel the muscles that much more. Next, we have the overloaded version done with an overhand grip. This allows for a couple more reps to be done and is by far your strongest position. It's the same muscles as before, but now you're getting more triceps involvement. So reserve this for lower repetitions or drop sets. The second pull apart is the horizontal style. Here, you'll basically only use an underhand grip. It's much harder and is essentially the original reverse pec deck. Do this to blow up your rear delts and enhance your overall posture. A must do, and believe it or not, you'll actually feel your side delts, so it can assist in developing that 3D pop. And you'll know this is true if you did lateral raises right beforehand. You're significantly weaker. Next, we have the full archer pull, where there's external rotation and we're bringing the arm fully back so the triceps are also recruited. This is much better than just pulling straight. Otherwise, you'd max out your expander rather quickly and the range of motion would be limited. Here, it's an excellent injury prevention developer and will develop all those mini muscles of the upper back alongside rotator cuffs. Try these out if your shoulders have been achy, and it might just solve the problem completely. For biceps, all you need are expander curls. You may experiment with reverse grip if you have a lagging brachioradialis, but this is more than sufficient. Prepare to blow up the top end. It'll feel comparable to cables, immense peak contractions, squeezing. This is your bodybuilder lift, and I like to do 2 arms, so I'm only showing you 1. For triceps, we have the violin extension. Really demolishes the long head through weighted stretch. Make sure you lean your torso in the direction of the lower hand and keep those elbows pointing up, not directly at an angle. This will give you the best contractions and prevent you from pressing. Now here's a sideways extension, which might be one of my favorite triceps exercises of all time. Everything about this feels right. I can't recommend it enough. Just do it, you'll know what I mean. And for the mirroring compound, embrace the back press. Here you can see 7 springs, and I'm straining like an absolute nut job. Very difficult, will build behind the neck mobility, and it's basically all triceps, shoulders with some upper back, but it's a straight press without pecs. Then we have the 1-arm back press, which is kind of a combination of the violin extension and the back press. Excellent shoulder press alternative, though actually hits the triceps a bit harder. And finally, for those who want a smooth lateral raise, the expander version will do that for you. It's a nice, even resistance profile, obviously heavier at the top, but at least in the bottom range, you're getting some great tension in there, as opposed to the dumbbell where the strength curve is all wacky. Then you can also do it behind the back like this, which is more traps. So different ways to build the side delts. And in general, the expander will always light up your delts. There you have it, guys, the complete chest expander video. I hope you learned a lot and found this old school topic interesting. Now I want to hear your feedback on chest expanders. How many springs can you currently pull apart? And what's your experience been like? Let me know. And I'll talk to you all next time.